If you've never witnessed Kobe Bryant playing basketball in his prime, you never saw the high-scoring games, the MVP level performances night in and night out. You never saw the tape of the reason why people say Kobe whenever they shoot a balled up paper ball in a trash can. And if you did watch Kobe, you witnessed both 8 and 24 version of Kobe Bryant, then you're gonna understand this video and you're gonna love this hooper that we're highlighting today. Because I think Bryce Cotton is currently the Kobe Bryant of the Australian NBL. But unlike Kobe, he wasn't highly touted coming out of high school, wasn't a McDonald's All-American, he didn't get drafted in the first round. And that's why I love telling stories like this on Overseas Reality, because in reality, more people will relate to guys like Bryce Cotton than they will to guys like Kobe Bryant. And that's with all due respect to Bryce Cotton, because in the Bryce Cotton story, we're talking about a guy that was overlooked at every step of the way, had to scratch and claw for everything that he ever got in this game. And trust me, he got a lot. That's a true underdog story, one that deserves to be told, and one that we will always tell here on this channel and here on this series of Overseas Reality. So if you're not already a subscriber, please stop what you're doing right now. Pause everything that's going on. You can even pause this video and just hit that subscribe button right now, because we're still a growing channel. I'm an ex-overseas pro of 9 years, and this is what I'm doing with the next part of my life. So the best way for you to help me tell my story and tell the story of guys like Bryce Cotton, I'm gonna need you to hit that subscribe button right now. Thank you for that. And without further ado, let's skip the boring stuff and get right back to the video. Bryce Cotton was born and raised in Tucson, Arizona. He didn't have the typical pro story. His parents weren't pro basketball players. As a matter of fact, his dad was a cop in New York and his mom sold real estate. Growing up, he was one of those kids that was just talented at every sport. The kid in gym class that breaks the push-up record. Then the next day you hear he broke the mile record. Then the next day you hear he shot the most threes in the basketball shootouts. Bryce loved every single sport there was. Out of all the sports, football happened to be his favorite. As a matter of fact, he didn't focus on basketball until he was diagnosed with a rare form of epilepsy. And after that, he switched his focus solely to basketball. At a young age, for an athletic kid obsessed with sports, to have to give up your dream of playing in the NFL one day, that's actually a lot for a young kid to have to go through. For a lot of kids, not just in the African American community, but just kids in general, sports is seen as like a gateway. Yeah, sure, we love going to school, and sure, we love playing and hanging out with our friends. But when you take a liking to a sport and you connect with it on a different level, you're putting hours in on it, you can start to see a future built around a sport. And guys like Bryce, for sure, they're thinking of climbing the mountaintop in whatever journey they embark on. For Bryce, it was gonna be football. Then when that shift happened, all the energy, all of the power that he had put into football is now shifted to hoops. That was the start of his deep passion that he had for basketball. He would always be playing outside. He's one of these guys, and you can tell by the way he plays. He's an outdoor hooper, something that you don't necessarily see a lot these days. You can take it from me. I'm a basketball trainer currently. I train the kids in my neighborhood, and I train the kids in New York City. Bryce's uncle is the former NFL player David Adams. I have to talk about David because he's an important part in Bryce's story. The only reason that I don't want to talk about David, or that I'm resisting talking about David, is because he plays for the Dallas Cowboys. Now, me as a Giants fan, that doesn't necessarily sit right, because come on, it's the Cowgirls. But it's important to Bryce's story, and we're definitely going to cover how important it was for Bryce to see that example of excellency in a sport that goes back to his football dreams that he had. The reason why he was dreaming about being in the NFL one day is partly because he grew up seeing somebody that played in the NFL. You got to take yourself into the psyche of a player that sees the exact example of what he wants to be, even though it's not in his household every day. For example, I grew up with a very famous basketball player who had a godfather that was an NBA, really respected NBA player, not necessarily a Hall of Fame level player, but surely an extremely skilled player. And he would see that this is the example. But that player ended up being a Hall of Fame player. And I also grew up with a kid whose uncle happened to be Wyclef Jean. Again, wasn't in the house every day, but he saw the example. He was extra motivated, got a little bit extra confidence than the average kid pursuing music because his uncle made it. He can go and shake his uncle's hand whenever he wants. And that kid ended up being a famous DJ. So for Bryce, not only was it embedded in his DNA, he was seeing the examples in real time. But despite his experiences, he was highly under-recruited in high school. He was the kind of player that he had the game, but the fact that he was an undersized guard in a crowded high school scene, especially on the West Coast, yeah, he's in Tucson, Arizona, but he's going to be pitted up against everybody from LA and California. And guards like that are just a dime a dozen. Like, that's just how basketball goes. My high school coach used to always say, players that are over 6'5" will always have a better chance at getting a scholarship than players that are under 6'5", because simply there's just more human beings that are under 6'5". So your pool of players that you're competing with is everybody that's not 6'5". That's why they call it the genetic lottery. But he was definitely the player that if the right coach got the eyes on him, you're gonna see that, man, this guy got some serious game. Reminds me a lot of John Morant. John Morant wasn't highly recruited in high school. Actually, I saw the tape. He didn't really look impressive. At first glance, guys like Cotton, guys like Morant don't stand out. Somebody has to be deeply interested in order to give you that second look that it would take to get recruited. Cotton ended up going to a camp for unsigned players. And when you put a guy that's so under-recruited, and the term under-recruited is overused, under-recruited truly means that your talent level is so high and your market value is so low, nobody knows who you are. Like, just because you don't have college attention doesn't mean you're under-recruited. But Bryce Cotton was truly undervalued. But it took one coach to see the light in him. He was getting ready to go to a junior college. He had given up on the hopes of going to Division I. But Providence College found him, they texted him, and in 2 weeks, he was on that plane. He didn't even know where Providence, Rhode Island was. This kid is from the West Coast, the west of West Coast in Arizona. Providence, Rhode Island is all the way on the East Coast. Literally, you can't get any more east than Providence, Rhode Island. And when he got that scholarship offer, the first thing he did was call moms. Yo, ma, I got an offer. You're not gonna believe where it's from. I got a Big East offer, the real Big East, by the way, from Providence College. You see, him and his mom would make highlight tapes, emailing every mid-major school and low-major school that they can find. They used online recruiting services. They would cold call college coaches, never shooting too high. They did the whole works. And the funny part about all this was the reason why they didn't shoot too high and go for the Big East schools and go for the ACC schools is because, well, they wanted to stay realistic. Because if you're not even hearing from Division II schools, what makes you realistically think that you're gonna go and get a high major? But he did. That Providence College offer was more than a full circle moment. That was an actual mama I made it moment. When Bryce Cotton got to Providence College in his freshman campaign, he was behind Marshawn Brooks. Now it's funny because I started this video with a Kobe comp when it comes to Bryce Cotton, but for those who know ball, and if you know ball, you already know what I'm gonna say. Marshawn Brooks was about as close to Kobe game-wise that you can get at the college level. He shot like Kobe. He mimicked Kobe's footwork. He mimicked Kobe's Mamba mentality before it was cool to do Mamba's mentality. The guy was a flat out hooper, right? You know how they say you got ball players and you got hoopers? Like, he personified a hooper's hooper. So when you come into a school like Providence College and you're one of the guys that, you know, you're a last minute recruit, you know, you weren't first on the board, you weren't the guy that we were like hunting down. You're the guy that 6 other guys said no to, and we just got you in because we just needed to give the scholarship to somebody. And you get to sit front row seats, as he calls it, to watch Marshawn Brooks hoop. Oh, you're going to be a sponge. And that's exactly what Bryce was. Not saying that he was so influenced greatly by Marshawn Brooks' game and impact. No, I'm not saying that. I mean, he probably was, but just being able to sharpen his iron with a guy like Marshawn. Right? Yeah, sure, Marshawn is going to get his buckets off in practice, but I'm sure Bryce Cotton has some legendary practices too where, all right, you're going to do that, I'm going to do this, right? You did that, I like that, I'm going to steal that, and I'm going to add my own twist to it. And this kind of experience for a player like Cotton really shaped who he was, because that's another chip that you stack on your shoulder and say, all right, you guys don't think I'm good enough to play? I didn't have to play over Marshawn, but I could have been his preferred backup, right? I could have been the first off the bench. You guys didn't think I was good enough to do that? Got you. That year, he averaged 4 points per game. In his sophomore campaign, he averaged 14 points per game. Talk about making the most out of your opportunities. Going from front row seats to being the second leading scorer on your team as an underclassman, right? You're still a sophomore. You're not even halfway through your college career. And then comes his junior year, and that was the year where opportunity would meet preparation. Vincent Council was the leader of the team and the team's point guard. He's the leading scorer. The offense runs through him. Right before his junior year starts, Vincent Council goes down to a hamstring injury. And even though Providence had a young Chris Dunn in the backcourt, they still needed a veteran leader to step up and take a lot of the offensive responsibility. So all that was handed on the plate of Bryce Cotton. You lead our team on the basketball court, but also you lead them in the locker room. And that's exactly what he did. Because his junior year, Bryce Cotton would go on to average 19.7 points per game, and he would become first team All Big East. Like I said, that was the real Big East. I don't know what it is now, but this is peak hoops. In his senior year, he hiked it up even more to 21.8 points per game. He even got his dimer badge up, averaging 5.9 assists, a significant improve from the previous year where he averaged only 2.9. And that, I think, had a lot to do with his NBA fit that he was trying to carve out, because now when you're dominating a league, a conference like the Big East, it's not just enough to be known as a scorer, right? Because everybody's a scorer. Like, you go to the NBA, these guys, I say this all the time, if you give any NBA player the opportunity to shoot 20 shots, like, a lot of them are going to be averaging 20 points. But the problem is that NBA teams can't really give everybody 20 shots, right? Some guys are only going to get 5 shots, and that's your career. Can you make the most out of 5 shots a game? Draymond Green, can you make the most out of 10 shots a game? And can you still become a Hall of Fame player with only 10 shots per game? Well, some guys can and some guys can't. So the adjustment that I saw in Bryce Cotton's game was a more concentrated effort to when he's coming off the pick and rolls. Not only are you looking for your shot, but you're looking to get your man open. You're looking out to, but I want to show that I bring more to an offense. And that's what he was doing. In college, Bryce Cotton became known for his insane motor for his size. Constantly sprinting off ball screens, sprinting off down screens. He just sprinted everywhere. Everything he did it hard. His shot making, especially from the three-point line, having huge games, always showing up when competition got the highest. Of course, leading the Big East in scoring, almost being a 2,000 point scorer at his high major college, finishing at the top of Providence College's scoring list with 1,975 points. Oh, and you can't forget, the man had 36 in a tournament game against UNC. Anyone with that career is gonna test the NBA waters. I mean, it's only right. He would go undrafted in 2014 and signed to the San Antonio Spurs. After a strong showing in Summer League, he was assigned to the D League, now known as the G League. And there he was a straight killer, assassin, picking up right where he left off from Providence College. In the G League that year, he was top 5 in scoring, averaging 22.4 points per game and just about 5 rebounds and 5 assists, showing that the NBA three-point line wasn't too far back like you see with a lot of prospects, especially guards, showing that with NBA type spacing, he can be an absolute nightmare as a matchup. And also showing that I can run teams, man. Give me the ball, I can facilitate. I'm not just a scorer. And those attributes eventually caught the eyes of the NBA team because he'd get his call-ups. After a couple of 10-day contracts and even a multi-year signing, despite showing the flashes in his games, like when he averaged 14.3 points over the final 4 games of the 2015 season, even though if you were looking close enough, the signs were there. Unfortunately, he didn't do enough to save his spot in the NBA. His great run that he went on at the end of the 2015 season wasn't enough to get it done, as by October 20th, right around opening night of the very next season, he was waived by the Spurs, and he never had a significant NBA moment since then. And that led to his overseas journey. Later that same basketball season in January, he would sign to the Xinjiang Flying Tigers Club in the Chinese Basketball Association. If you know overseas hoops, then you know that the CBA's play style is closer to the NBA than it is to a European play style. So the same things he was able to do in the the D League, he brought that right to the CBA. Unlike my boy J. Cole, which we're gonna get off on a quick tangent. I just want to say that all the overseas hoopers are pissed at what J. Cole displayed, not only what he displayed, but even just the club giving a roster spot to him, because it kind of diminishes the work that guys like Bryce Cotton, guys like me for 9 years overseas in Europe and South America, all my boys were saying they're making a mockery out of our profession, right? They're making it seem like you can do what you want. You can smoke weed. You can spend the night in studios. You can drink and do all this rapper lifestyle stuff, which I'm a fan of the music, but as people, we know they're living different lives, but they're giving the illusion that what we do is so small that you can just do all that crap and jump right into the game and compete at the levels that we compete at, which that's just not the truth, especially in the CBA. Like, do you have any idea what normal basketball players have to accomplish in their careers to get a shot at the CBA? And we're going to get back to Bryce Cotton in a bit, but I had to get this off my chest. In order to play in the CBA for a normal basketball player, you have to have an NBA tag, which means you are at one point one of the best 350 players in the world. Right? So you need the NBA tag, or you need an astounding, a phenomenal, incredible, legendary overseas career just to get a shot in the CBA. Or you need to be J. Cole riding bikes around Manhattan and making songs. Make it make sense. But Bryce was there too. And in the CBA, he would average 21.2 points per game. And later that season, he would make a transfer to Turkey to join the EuroLeague club Anadolu Efes, which is the team of one of the players that we featured on this same channel, on this same series, Stanley Johnson. If you haven't seen that video, go check it out, because me and Stanley will be doing a follow-up on that video in the summertime when he's done with his season in Japan. But similar to Stanley, Bryce also saw the transition from an NBA style, freely playing system of basketball to the EuroLeague, especially Efes. They saw it was a tough transition because the two games are just so different. And for Bryce, he would only average 8 points per game when he played in Turkey. Now, granted, maybe if he stayed longer, he would have made those adjustments and he would have been back up to those 15, 16 point averages. But to say that he would have been averaging 21 points per game in the EuroLeague, you'd be pretty naive to say that. But anyway, we'll never know, because Bryce ended up leaving Turkey for safety reasons. And everything happens for a reason, because him leaving Turkey opened him up to the prime of his career and a legendary NBL run that we may never see again. Now, before that, I have to say this. There's been so many great import players that came from America to the NBL in Australia. Shout out to Bruce Bolden. Shout out to all the other imports that came over and really truly made a cultural impact on Australian basketball. Because if you don't know, Australia is one of those places where a lot of Americans tend to go and they tend to stay, right? You have some countries that people tend to figure life out, and they see Australia as a place of, it's a good place to start, but it's also somewhere that I want to build beyond the game of basketball, right? There's a lot going on there. So when Bryce first came to Australia, he landed in Perth on January 3rd, 2017. This marked the first year of the next 8 years, giving blood, sweat, and tears to one club, pretty much accomplishing everything you can in one place. And in that very first game, when he put that Perth Wildcat jersey on, he scored 26 points. And that pretty much showed, it forecasted everything that was to come over the next 8. I mean, it was clear from day one that Bryce came to get buckets. And that brings me back to my Kobe comparison, because Kobe was about one thing at the end of the day. Sure, he was a great passer. Sure, he played good defense. Kobe really got some stops. He was really in those passing lanes. But guess what? You don't get the nickname Black Mamba for getting stops, right? Kobe was about buckets. Kobe's high, 81. Bryce Cotton's high, 53, overseas with 10 minutes quarters. You don't lead the old school Big East, high major Division I basketball in scoring to come overseas and be a role player. No, Bryce Cotton did that already behind Marshawn Brooks. He came to Australia to score. And who's gonna stop him? You ain't. I ain't. But most importantly, in his first season in the Australian NBL, Bryce Cotton won a championship. And that established a standard that he set and that he would stay true to his whole tenure. In the next season, the 2017-2018 season, MVP. And it's worth noting that after his first full season and his first season winning MVP, he spent his offseason finishing the year off in Italy, playing for the top division, Brescia Leonessa. Rate my accent in the comments. I'm not from Italy, but I try. Averaging 12.3 points per game and just about 2 rebounds and 2 assists. If you're wondering why I'm holding Bryce Cotton in such high regard, this is what the rest of his tenure at the Perth Wildcats looked like. 2018-2019 championship. 2019-2020 MVP and championship. 2020-2021 MVP. I don't think they had a championship that year. 21-22 scoring title. 22-23 scoring title and NBL first team. 23-24 his 4th MVP. 24-25 his 5th MVP. Not to mention, this season he battled toe-to-toe with Kendrick Davis and the Sydney Kings and took those guys to the very last game. They did a 5-game series and it was close every single game. He took those boys to the wire and came up short, but he did win MVP this year. That alone sounds like not only a guy that's in the prime of his career, but a guy that's on the cusp or in the middle of doing something completely legendary in a country that's not his own. It's so rare to find that synergy between a club and an import player, let alone a regular player. Because overseas, there's so many factors that comes in between a player being a mainstay at one club. You got politics, contract disputes, coaching changes, GM changes, changing of the guards, because sometimes these local players are beloved, and if the right local player comes into your organization, he can be a culture shifter. And even though through all of that, Bryce remained true to Perth Wildcats for as long as he could. And now he's in a new club, in a completely new situation, and I can see him carving out the same back end of his career. Look at this like the Kobe 24 jersey. That Perth run was pretty much Kobe 8. Now he's in the back end, and we get a front row seat to see just how far he can take this thing. And I think it's safe to say that smart money is the bet on him taking it all the way. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. And if you like the video, like the video. I'm doing these overseas reality series features every Sunday. So if you really enjoyed this story and want to hear more like Bryce's, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button and drop in the comments if there's anybody that you want me to do this feature on. Because even Bryce Cotton was given to me by one of my followers. Shout out to you. You know who you are. And I'm always open for suggestions. So make sure you guys leave that in the comments. Don't forget. And until next time, peace.